In November 2013, we went to Corinth, Mississippi to film an oral history project. We called it that, but really we just wanted to find some great storytellers and let them have their say. What follows is one of those storytellers, recorded at the Alcorn County Genealogical Society. We hope you enjoy hearing it as much as we did.
Lila Briggs Voyles, V-O-Y-L-E-S.
Tell me about your family history.
Now you have to talk loud for me.
Can you tell me about your family history?
Yes.
Go ahead.
We're getting you making a copy of that?
I am.
Well, okay. Well, he brought his family on down here, and the first son became my great-grandfather. But he died shortly after they all got down here. So my great-grandfather became administrator of the estate. He had 3 children that were not old enough. They needed guardians, so he became their guardians, 3 children. Those children lived with him, and then his wife had a brother and 2 sisters. They were crutchers, and some of them lived with them. They built this old house out here. Right now it's 8 miles west of Corinth, off of Highway 72. It's north of Highway 72 as you go west. And they built this old house, the log house, a 20-foot square log house out of oak logs. A 20-foot square house over here out of oak logs. In between it was a hallway almost that wide. The house was almost 60 feet long, all out of those logs. And it was a house. They weren't called cabins if they had it upstairs, so they had it upstairs to them. And that upstairs went out of one room, and they had a little closet under that stairway that went up, and under that closet they would keep it locked. One uncle remembered that they'd have the closet locked, and he would want some of the sugar that they had locked up in there, and he'd want some of that, and so he wouldn't go eat supper with them. When they went to eat supper, he'd stay there and get some of the sugar. And he told us that story when he came to live with us later. But this old house was built in 1860. There was a Yankee man that was his carpenter. He was named Mr. Crow. Well, the war started in 1862. Mr. Crow took off, and he went back north, and they never saw him anymore. So they still had the house, and all them living there. And there's 2 sides. Upstairs, over one end of it, the girls slept up there, and over the other end of it, the boys slept up there. The boys had to climb a ladder to get to their part, but the girls could walk up the stairs to get theirs. Well, that old house was built in 1962. The grandfather kept living there. He was named Sterling Henry Briggs, and he kept living there until he died in 1884. But his wife, she still lived there, and she was a crutcher. And so he died in 84, and she lived on until 1901. But in the meantime, 2 grandsons would go and spend the night with her, and if they got down there, she'd be a quilting, and if they would get under her quilt, and they would scuffle and wrestle, and when they did that, they'd knock her quilt frames and stick her fingers. So she told my grandfather about that, and my Uncle John, which was my grandfather's oldest son, was one of the grandsons that was staying with her. He said his daddy was nearly beat him to death for that. That was the worst whipping he ever had. So when that old woman died, he was awfully happy. She was his grandma, but he was awfully happy for that. And my daddy wasn't born until 1892, so that was 12 years difference in them. So the first son was out and gone, and he needed a son to be home with him. So he took my daddy out of school in the 4th grade and carried him home to work instead of going to school. But later, after Daddy got to be 21 years old, he went out on his own and started farming on his own. And they had a good teacher that taught school. She was named Miss Laura Martin. She was Laura Dixon Martin. And so my daddy went down there and he paid her to tutor him. And so she tutored him in English and arithmetic. And my mama came along and she couldn't go to school. Her family didn't have the money to send her to school. She wanted to go to Kasuth school. It was Alcorn Agricultural High School at that time. But she couldn't go because they didn't have the money. But they got moved down here. So she went to Miss Laura Martin, and she taught the young people, the primer, the beginners, and so on, from Miss Martin to teach her high school. And so my mother and daddy they loved books and they loved schooling. He wanted to be sure that I got to go to school. That was one thing for sure, and sure that they did.
And what year were you born?
Me?
Yes, what year?
1916. And my brother in 20 and my sister in 24. But we got moved over there in 1926 to the old Briggs home, the old log home.
Wow.
Well, in the meantime, while the Dillinghams were living there, my Uncle Josh Dillinghams had put porches around the house. It had these upstairs and downstairs stolen, but he built a dining room section and a kitchen section and put porches all around the house, and it was a good house. Well, the living room that we went in, it was sealed with boards about 12 inches square overhead and on the sides, and of course the floor was wide planks in the floor. But they pasted newspaper on the wall. What the house was papered with was newspapers. So it was a lot of fun to anybody to come in and read the stories off of them old papers on the wall. Mama said when she was laying in bed after I'd been born, she spent her time reading the paper. But the first thing we did when we got there, Mama they had been raising chickens and so on at home. She sold some hens, and she took the money from her hens and she bought wallpaper. They put new wallpaper over that printed newspaper, and over the other room that was across the open hallway, they had wallpaper they put on that. But then what was the dining room and the kitchen didn't even get sealed. They were just boarded up. But everybody wanted to come back home because at the meantime they'd lived there. And when I was going to high school, you never knew who would be at home when you got home in the afternoon. One time, Daddy and Mama, the little stove that they cooked on in the kitchen was just a little oblong iron stove that 4 eyes on it, and the pipes went up through the ceiling. We got home, they had bought a new stove, and it had a warming closet on it and a reservoir on the side on it to heat water. Well, that was good. We sure did enjoy that, to have that stove with that warm water and a good place to get behind it to have your bath. In the morning, my daddy started a milk route, and he went around to different people's houses and picked up their milk in cans and brought it to Corinth to the Kraft Cheese Company, and they processed and made cheese out of it and sold it. So the country people was glad for him to come along with that milk truck, and they would have some money. That was during the Depression in the 30s, see? Mm-hmm. And so he did that and kept his milk route going. So he'd always buy a hoop of cheese and bring it home, those round hoops. So they'd have that, and they'd scoot it under a bed. And in the morning when Mama was going to fix lunches for the children, they'd bring that hoop of cheese out and cut slices to put in the biscuits so we could carry with us to school. Then we was going to have another baby in our family in 1927. So this lady, there was named Mary Green Butler. She was a midwife. She came to stay with us until the brother he was named James Henry, but he was to be called Jaybird. And the reason why, Jaybird Dillingham, his grandpa, when they came into Alcorn County, it was Old Tishomingo County then, Corinth was not even a city. It had not been made a city. It didn't have a courthouse. It had a buildings that they could have court in and so on here, like Justice of Peace and so on. But anyway, he got too much liquor, and he came to town and had an old bull out there, and that old bull was named Jaybird. So they dared him to ride up the courthouse steps on old Bull, and he did. Well, Mama always told us that story because the bull was named Jaybird. That's what Grandpa was called. But we found out later that he rode up those steps naked as a jaybird, and that's why it got called Jaybird.
As folks do.
As folks do. Yeah, right here, this very area, that's where the courthouse was. And he rode it up there naked as a jaybird. And so my brother he was Jaybird as long as he lived, and he just loved that story. He'd tell it to everybody. I went home from school one evening. Uncle George was living with us. Mama and Daddy had fixed him a room. He had 10 quilts, and an iron bed, and a feather bed, and a pillow, and a trunk, and he moved that with him wherever he went. He moved it to our house. And he was so happy to be there. He would come in there and sit in front of the fireplace in the rocking chair in the middle of the floor. Mama'd be on one side churning, and this big old fireplace that the great-granddaddy had built the bricks there on the farm. And it was a big old fireplace that kept the house good and warm. And it was sealed with all that oak log, them white oak logs, and them wide planks, and chinked and daubed in them in between the logs too. And I played paper dolls under there, so I knew about those logs. You could get up under there where your fireplace was. It would be warm on the ground, and I'd get up there with my paper dolls and play with them in the wintertime. In 1920, Daddy was building a house near us for a tenant to live in, so there'd be somebody to help Mama with her children. And so Grandpa was there helping him saw. They didn't have electricity, had to saw with a handsaw. He was standing between the sills of that porch sawing with a handsaw, and Mama and I walked out there, and that's the last time I saw my grandpa. I was 3.5 years old, and he left home to go he had planted corn, and the corn needed to be side dressed, and he had to come to town to get fertilized. Coming around the long road, it would be 15 miles a long road, but he left home in the middle of the night and drove to town and got over here on Linden Street where it crossed the railroad there. Coming down there, and the roads was graveled, and there was willow trees growing along each side of the railroad. He'd coming down that hillside, and he drove his mules over that railroad, and then the train killed him and his mules. That was in 1920. Well, the next year in 1921, Mama's family came down with an epidemic of typhoid fever. We all went out there, and they carried the kids and fixed us a pallet out on the cotton seeds, and with quilts on it for us to sleep out there. We couldn't go in the house because typhoid fever was catching. Then in December, my daddy came down with it. They still had the germ. And so he came down with a typhoid fever in December, and they thought he was going to die, but he didn't. He made it through. Dr. Hughes, good old Dr. Hughes, came in the buggy. He rode a mule. He came there, or he rode a horse. He came to see my daddy sometimes twice a day and pulled him through. And I remember Daddy couldn't eat cornbread or anything like that because his typhoid fever would cook you on the insides, and his intestines would hang in on his intestines. So he had to eat something soft. He could drink sweet milk, and put cornflakes in the sweet milk, and he could eat that. And of course we'd always look at those cornflakes, when there'd be a little flakes. Well, on Daddy's foot, he'd be a little scale sticking them on his foot. His peeling off. Them scales coming off of him just like typhoid fever, it cooked him inside and out. But he got well, and he lived till 1975, so he had a good long life. I think the Dillinghams crossed over. What time you got to go?
I'm fine. I was just checking my watch.
Time.
Keep talking. This is perfect.
I'm having a good time.
Excellent.
We are too.
The Dillinghams crossed over at the Cumberland Gap out of Virginia, where they came from out in there. They crossed over the Cumberland Gap. They crossed the corner of Kentucky, came on down through Tennessee, and they went down the Cumberland River down to Nashville, on down the Cumberland River to Monroe County, Mississippi, and they got down there in 1837. They hadn't been farmers. They'd been frontiers people. As land would open up, they'd get a little further over and over. And they came on down there. They built a racetrack. They had a big racetrack, and they did a lot of racing. But whiskey was just a local thing to have, whatever they got to. They had, it wasn't beer, it was just rye whiskey. So they thought it was bad luck for an old hen to crow. So this morning in 1850, Grandpa Joshua's old hen crowed. And he went out there and he shot the old hen and killed her because it was bad luck for a hen to crow. Okay, he took off and went down to the road. There wasn't no road, and he went to a saloon where two drunk men was fighting, so he was going to separate the two drunk men, and he got killed. My husband was Norbin Mitchell Voyles. He was driving a school bus. So he picked me up to carry me to school on that school bus, and so I was the first one to go off, the last one to get on in the morning, the last one to get off, so he became my boyfriend. He was my boyfriend for 3 years, and we married after I got out of high school, and we was married 50-something years.
That's wonderful.
54. And we had one daughter, she's June, and she married Richard Leonard, the love of her life, and she has 3 children and 3 grandchildren. Her husband died when they'd been married 31 years. She keeps working. She worked in taxes last year. She'll go back and work in taxes when tax time comes again.
Yeah. Miss Lila, thank you so much for this. Thank you for coming down here today.
Well, I've got a whole bunch. You want to stay all afternoon?
I think you've done a remarkable job.
Should I?
Thank
you did a good job.
Thank you very much for spending the time with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, look at these pictures. Don't leave here without that.
I won't leave here without a thing.